Okay, this is an easy one. Penalties for disinformation. Okay, this is for lawyers and judges. For lawyers and judges, knowingly giving disinformation could lead to serious penalties, including disbarment or removal from office, fines, and criminal charges. The specific penalties depend on the nature of the false information, the context in which it was given, and the harm it caused. The legal system imposes these penalties to uphold judicial integrity and ensure the fairness administration of justice. Penalties for lawyers. Lawyers are held to a high ethical standards as officers of the court when they knowingly give false information in a professional context. They can face severe consequences. Professional discipline. State Bar Association investigate and prosecute ethical violations, which can result in sanctions ranging from reprimands and suspensions to permanent disbarment. This applies to making false statements to a court, opposing counsel, or others in a course of representation. Monetary penalties. A lawyer who files a frivolous lawsuit or submits fabricated evidence may be ordered to pay significant monetary sanctions to compensate the court for or the opposing party. They're talking about slap suits. Slap suits are illegal if you read the rules of professional conduct, but nobody's going to tell you about that because, the bar, lawyers on both sides make a lot of money fighting something they shouldn't be. It's unnecessary. Okay, monetary penalties. A lawyer who files a frivolous lawsuit or submits fabricated evidence may be ordered to pay significant monetary sanctions to compensate the court and the opposing party. Anybody, because lawyers violate the rules and the codes, they don't tell you about them. And they will get mad at you if you ask about them and tell you you don't need to know about them, but you need to know because that's in the public interest, and doing what's in the public interest is a requirement of all lawyers, judges, politicians, everybody in public service. Okay? Criminal charges. In cases of extreme misconduct, a lawyer can face criminal prosecution for offenses like perjury. People didn't believe me. Lawyers could be cited for perjury in a court of law when they misrepresent a person, but that misrepresentation is perjury. Anything they say in a court of law is disinformation, not the truth, a lie, fabricated, for what reason? What possible reason could they have outside of monetary gain? Billable items. Criminal charges. In case of extreme misconduct, a lawyer can face criminal prosecution for offenses like perjury or fraud in court. For example, some state laws criminalize attorney deceit and collusion and can result in felony charges. Civil liability. A lawyer who knowingly provides false information might also be sued for damages by those harmed by their actions. Penalty for judges. Judges are expected to be impartial, and it says that in the preamble of the Code of Judicial Conduct. They're supposed to protect everybody's rights. LGBT, minorities, underrepresented population, the greater good. The needs of the many, not the needs of the few. Judges are expected to be impartial and are held to an even higher ethical standard. Penalties for judicial misinformation are pursued by special commissions and extreme cases through impeachment. Judicial discipline. Claims of misinformation are investigated by state judicial performance commissions and federal councils. A judge found to have violated the judicial code of conduct by knowingly spreading false information can face penalties ranging from public reprimand to suspension or removal from office. Social media restrictions. A judge's online presence is also scrutinized. For example, some judges have been reprimanded for spreading political misinformation or showing bias on social media. Even showing bias, you cannot even appear to present to have anybody perceive you as biased, especially in politics. That's why all judges, it's a requirement, it's in the Code of Judicial Conduct to remain apolitical. For their decisions always to be apolitical in the interests of justice, not in self-interest, the interests of the bar or the court, the tribunal, or the interest parochial interests, and definitely not in the interest of Wall Street, the greed of the few. Okay, appellate review of judges-based concerns or rulings based on false information can be challenged on appeal, which could lead to their decisions being overturned and a new trial ordered. Impeachment. In most serious cases, judges can be impeached by the legislature of offenses that amount to a serious abuse of power, including spreading false information for personal or political gain. Loss of immunity, where judges typically have immunity from civil lawsuits for their official acts. This protection can be lost if they act outside their judicial capacity, such as by engaging in administrative misconduct or illegal behavior. That's why I explained to you conspiracy or rights against rights under the color of law. Okay, so when you cite that, you can also cite everybody for misinformation, okay? When you cite your lawyer for ineffective assistance of counsel, you're going to cite them for misinformation. And they're going to say how, well, they didn't give you the reasonable knowledge to make an informed decision, to give informed consent. Well, they said they didn't go over that with you. Well, that's withholding information, which still counts as disinformation. Okay, so like I said, if a lawyer isn't going over the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct with you, that's deprivation of rights. State's attorney and the judge not citing your attorney for ineffective assistance of counsel, they are both equally guilty of deprivation of rights. They conspired together, because if one reports another, then everybody winds up reporting, which is mandatory. Everybody has to report each other and themselves as well, according to the rules and the codes. And them not doing it is violating the law. But them not telling you, even denying it, or ignoring you, like they did that one gentleman when he told the judge to cite the lawyers and himself, and the lawyers to cite the judge and themselves, and nobody did it. They cut him loose, but legally they were all supposed to go to jail, be removed from public service, fines, some call it restitutions, and but either way, if nobody, and they will deny it, lawyers will deny that they violate the rules of professional conduct. And the easiest way to find out is go over their cases. Call their clients, get a list of their clients, ask their clients, hey, did your lawyer go over this with you? Did your lawyer go over the rules of professional conduct with you? Not doing so? Well, how is that getting informed consent from you? You need reasonable information to give informed decision, to give that informed consent, and knowing his and the judge's legal obligations to you will give you that informed consent. Then I got lawyers denying that, hey, we don't do this. It's written. No. The easiest way for anybody and everybody out there to prove me right or wrong, if you have a lawyer, if you need a lawyer, even if you don't, find a lawyer. Ask him if you can interview him. Pull out the codes of judicial conduct and the rules of professional conduct and go over it with them with a fine-tooth comb. I can guarantee your questions will go unanswered. Ask them if they ever violated the rules of professional conduct. It's going to be awful hard for anybody to prove that they did not do that if you read the rules of professional conduct. How about them? They're legally obligated to report judicial misconduct. They are legally responsible to enforce the code of judicial conduct. All lawyers and judges are legally responsible for enforcing the rules and the codes. This is effective assistance of counsel. This is what due process is. This is how you get a fair trial. And being denied effective assistance of counsel is being denied a fair trial, which is being denied effective assistance of counsel. Impeachment. In most serious cases, judges can be impeached. Loss of immunity. I already went that. But okay, I just wanted to give you like some people would do. Grab you by the short and curlies. get you to read this. All right. But this information is illegal. And I say it's easy because every time I go on the internet, I watch TV, I always hear everybody complaining about disinformation amongst lawyers and judges. But why is nobody getting locked up for that? Why is if you watch the trials with, what was her name, or their name, Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, I think. But they brought all these cases to stop the steal to court. And there was, 62, 63 cases brought before the court where they were trying to say the election was stolen. And everybody was proven in court wrong. They had nothing to substantiate, nothing to prove what they were saying. They went in there with thoughts and feelings, hopes and prayers, flying on a, wing in a prayer. They went in there and their case was held together with spit and tape. And they couldn't prove anything. They went in there with disinformation. They went in there with people's opinions saying, well, this is their truth. It's not the truth. Nothing that can be proven in a court of law. Nothing that can be proved in a court of law. That's why these cases were dismissed. But that's violating the oath. That's violating the rules of professional conduct. That's violating the oath they took. Not to spread disinformation and not to go to court with disinformation and not to present slap suits. So many states allow slap suits and they're based on disinformation. Anybody could beat them if they just go in there with the rules and the codes. Some people capitulate because they can't afford the expense of an attorney to fight the case, but it's easily to fight the case if you read the rules and the codes, and you'll find that these cases can't be substantiated, and then you cite the attorney for disinformation, bringing forth the case they can't, that they can't prove. I had somebody call me for, they said I owed money for a loan, and I had to pay if I just give them some money. They might not go after me for all of it, and I wanted, the file. They said, no, legally we can't do that, government laws, and I asked them which government laws, so that they can't give me the information. They said, well, you don't understand. I said, is that what you call expediting litigation? Excuse me? Is that what you call expediting litigation? It would be competent. And conversation, well, they're like, what? I says, you do realize I'm citing the rules of professional conduct, right? And I threw out fairness to the opposing party and a few other rules, competence, started talking about truthfulness in statements, bringing forth frivolous and fraudulent claims, citing the rules of professional conduct, throwing sentences in from the preamble. They apologized, capitulated, and said they wouldn't bother me again. Okay, but, I've already filed complaints with the ARDC, the Judicial Inquiry Board, the 80s and 90s, and I guess they got tired of me and they sent CPD after me and they told me, let it go. You made it, you're alive, you still got your family to think of. And then they brought up my dad, and my mom, and then my brother, going through a divorce, and how he's a weekend warrior dad or something like that. And then they mentioned my older sister by her married name, and that just sent me into shock. And my migraines were bothering me, and my temper flared, my blood pressure rose, I started puking, He just went on, naming off family members, spouses, kids. What would you do? I had to stop. But I stopped doing it for me, but I didn't stop doing it for other people. But before my dad passed away, he told me, finish what you started, and that was proving that conspiracy against rights under the color of law in my cases. Win or lose, I always lost. I wanted Social Security. But that took 10 years. And that's because nobody did their job. And they didn't capitulate till the very end. After a suit had to go back to court, and the judge complained, and, for quite some time, 2.5, 3 hours, I forgot, I didn't time it. Took a break, and I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and I was peed off, and told the lawyer, wait till I go back in there. He said, what could you possibly tell the lawyer? I showed him I had a copy of the rules, the codes, a copy of each complaint forms from each. He ran inside, told the judge, came back outside and told me the judge capitulated. He gave in, you got your 10 years back pay, you got your red, white, and blue card. But, nobody went to jail. I would have filed another complaint with the RDC and the Illinois Judicial Inquiry Board, but anybody and everybody that's ever filed complaints with them will tell you they don't do their job. They only answered me one time, and they said they questioned the state's attorney's office, and the state's attorney's office called me a liar, so thus I'm a liar. But I proved the state's attorney lied in everything. And everything. The first thing I showed him was a statement and facts and proved that a lie. With the minimus papers, the court papers I got from the appellate court that reduced the sentence I had from 10 years to 6 years. I served 2 years and 10 months, and the prosecutor said in their statement of facts that I just served a 10-year sentence. I just got out of prison. And that's why the judge gave me time. He said, you just got out of prison, now you're going back. Which was a lie. And everything, the plaintiff testified, the testimony against me was a lie. And they didn't allow me the hospital reports, because if I would have seen the hospital reports, I could have proved unequivocally that she did not suffer the injuries she said she did. Everything her testimony in court contradicted what was in the hospital reports, which also contradicted what was said in the civil suit. She told so many different stories, but they only went with the one she told in court in the trial. But in the preliminary hearing, the judge, he was honest, but not honest enough. When she gave the statement, the same statement she gave in the trial, the judge told her that was perjury. He said, who gave you that information? She said, the doctors. Said, what doctors? I got the hospital reports right here. You didn't suffer those injuries. And he chastised the state's attorney a little bit, but he didn't cite the state's attorney for violating 3.8 special rules of the prosecutor, which clearly states that they can't bring forth a case that there's no probable cause for, but they did it anyways. They let her testify to injuries that she never experienced. They let her testify for, things that never happened. Procedures in the hospital that didn't happen. But my lawyer, the state's attorney, and the judge thought I didn't need to see that hospital report. I didn't get to see it till a couple of years later. And it wasn't that long. But I had to defend myself in the civil suit. By that time, I got the hospital reports. I seen it and told myself, if the judge should have cited her, if the judge would have cited her for perjury in the first place, I nearly lost my life. The judge didn't want me coming out there. My lawyer told the judge I was going to come out there and cite everybody for violating the rules and the codes, and the judge had the state's attorney or the sheriffs take me back to the county jail and beat the life out of me. I have the hospital reports. I don't have a video, but I have a video of me reading the hospital reports. It's on my YouTube channel, The Vent. It's called PTSD and Me. I made that, I don't know, about 8-10 years ago. But I'm just going over the hospital reports, reading them to you word for word to the letter. And saying anything other would be violating the law, because there are penalties for violating the letter of the law, just as there are penalties for disinformation. Okay, so I just wanted to make that a quick one for you. All right, penalties. You see it all the time if you watch. I watch the court channel. I watch every time a politician is up before the court, lawyers, judges, their rulings, what they say, and it's ludicrous. I made a video of me watching Congress, and some congressmen and women telling the others, hey, it's in the public interest. Check on the penalties for violating the public interest. How about the public trust? Check on the public trust doctrine. Nobody's doing it. That's all I'm trying to do, okay? So far, I've given you a lot of laws. That's all I'm doing, is reading it to you, word for word, to the letter, as required by the law, the letter of the law, okay? And I can't tell you it means something other than what it does, because your eyes will tell you different. That's why I go by the letter of the law. So we all see the same thing, we all say the same thing, and we all hear the same thing. And that's in the spirit of the law. Okay. All right, thanks, people. Remember the penalties for disinformation in the legal arena. Hold them accountable. And use all those other laws I talk about. Nothing but peace and love to you. May your Creator, may your Creator always be in your life and rain many blessings. I wish you nothing less than a long life and good health, and if the public trust doctrine was a force to its entirety, you would have universal health care. Sure, you may pay more in taxes, but my God, you won't lose your house trying to pay your medical bills. Imagine only needing a couple dollars for your medications. No deductibles, no premiums, no insurance premiums. Sure, a lot of insurance companies will fold. They shouldn't be there in the first place. But you would know that if you read the public trust doctrine. And like I said, any of these laws you go over, hold them to the letter of the law, and that there are penalties for violating the letter of the law. And remember, so if they don't go by what's said, and they try to tell you, that's disinformation. If they tell you otherwise, that's information. So they could be charged for disinformation as well. Okay, there are legal consequences in the legal arena for disinformation. Okay? Once you know, you know. That knowledge is something nobody can ever take away from you. Once you know, you know. I've gotten a few people to finally understand that. Thank God, because I really need somebody. I know sooner or later somebody's going to come after me and unalive me. Because I'm exposing, the injustice in the justice system. No matter where you go, no matter what court you're in, there's always a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. And since the Constitution was written, we've been living under the color of law. Sure, we removed the monarchy and replaced it with a political system, but yet we didn't remove the hierarchy. The hierarchy, the rich people still control our government. It's called a corporacy. A corporacy. Everything, laws, everything written in favor of the rich. Look up corporacy. I already did a video on that. It's time to end the corporacy. Let me just do that real quick. Corporacy. The corporacy, most commonly a proper name for a free, responsive WordPress theme designed for business and corporate websites. Okay, it says here, it can refer to a concept of corporatocracy or corporacy, an economic and political system influenced or controlled by corporate interests. Corporacy. See, corporacy is also a concept. Definition: economic, political, and judicial system where the business corporations have significant control or influence. A society where corporate power is pervasive, leading to the system where money holds significant weight in politics and policy. Origin: the term is often used in the political discourse to criticize the undue influence of corporations on government and societal affairs. Okay, so no, we are not a corporacy, we are a democracy. Okay, corporatocracy. See? Corporacy or corporacy is an economic, political, and judicial system controlled or influenced by business corporations and or corporate interests. Come on, I mean, don't you want that to stop? Concept has been used in explanations of big bailouts, excessive pay for CEOs, and the exploitation of national treasuries, and they're talking about the public trust doctrine, exploiting the public trust doctrine, which is totally illegal. National treasuries, people, and natural resources. Look at the public trust doctrine, folks. It has been used by critics of globalization, sometimes in conjunction with criticism of the World Bank on unfair lending practice, as well as criticism of free trade agreements. Corporate rule is also a common theme in dystopian science fiction media. Okay, forms of corporacy, different forms. Crony capitalism, which corporations obtain favors and privileges from the state in exchange for funding and political support. That's violating the basic obligations of public service. All right. Authoritarian capitalism, in which corporations align themselves with representative anti-democratic political regimes. Okay, here it is. The White House Putsch. Bismuth plot, also called the Wall Street Putsch and the White House Putsch, was a political conspiracy in 1933 in the United States to overthrow the government of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and star Smedley Butler as director. Okay, so, it's not like this isn't the first time. I mean, we've always been ruled by, corporacy. It's just that nobody's ever really bothered to think about it. But look I did a video, a piece on this. There had been a plot to overthrow Franklin D. Roosevelt in favor of a fascist government, supposedly in the works. That's the definition of fascism, corporacy or corporacy. In favor of fascist government, supposedly in the works since 1933. People keep talking about Project 2025. How about talking about Project 1933? This coming to fruition. The claims of the conspiracy came from a very conspicuous and reliable source, Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated war heroes of the time. Okay, tells you who he is. Some people always, when I did talk to them, said I was a Democrat and anti. Well, it was the Republican Party that worked with Wall Street to overthrow FDR to stop the New Deal. They didn't like the idea of Social Security, unions, bank regulations. FDR, he came in after, the collapse of Wall Street, and it was because there was no regulation. There was so there was heavy regulation, so Wall Street couldn't do what they did to the American public. It was a giant Ponzi scheme, and people were buying worthless stock, what we call to this day meme stock, and the people who were selling the stock kept selling, and average people, even banks, were giving loans for this stock, and it turns out the stock was actually nothing, a bunch of nothingness, and a lot of people lost a lot. Even banks closed because not everybody was in on the Ponzi scheme, but those within it managed to buy up a whole lot dirt cheap. But I think history tells you itself. If it wasn't for the New Deal, America would have remained in a depression far much longer. The New Deal got the American economy off its hands and knees and on its feet, and not just the United States, but the world. People keep claiming about the global economy, but there's always been a global economy. I mean, if you go back in history, there was a time where Spain and Portugal divided up the world, They drew a line. This is your side, this is my side, and if anybody messes with you, we'll come help you. Anybody messes with us, but it was based on corporacy. Let's see. So you should really read this, but it tells you about how the Republican Party worked with Wall Street to stop FDR. Good thing Smedley said no, and he told on everybody. The Major General was stunned. There was very little chance that a group of veterans had been able to gather such a vast amount of funds. Even worse, the speech that McGuire asked Butler to deliver, a speech which had little to do with veteran affairs, instead was more critical of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's recent move away from the gold standard. The abandonment of the gold standard was a major striking point for many high-ranking officials and the bankers in the country during 1933, although there were several recognized issues with money backed by gold, such as the dependency on gold production and short-term price instabilities. Many bankers were fearful that the gold-backed loans would not be paid back in full by President's new policies. But you should really read this. Okay, I did a video and I read the whole thing to you. All right, but it tells you about Wall Street working with politicians to overthrow, FDR. But his policies got him elected 4 times. I used to think it was 3 times, but I remember reading somewhere else that said he got elected 4 times. But that's, when everybody decided he had too much power, the Republicans and the Democrats, and that's when they came up with this thing about limiting presidential terms, serving more than 2 terms. And the power he had was the power of the people. He was doing what he was legally required to do according to the oath, and serve the public interest and maintain the public trust. And the public trust is the public trust fund. The public's trust fund. Okay, so Social Security became part of your trust fund. Nobody's allowed to touch that, Hey, it's just, just a thought that you should get into. I've been fighting with lawyers, judges, politicians. Oh, my God. As soon as, 1980. I met all kinds of different politicians. And since I'm in Illinois, they're mostly Democrats, and they didn't want to hear anything I had to say. But then when I confronted Republican politicians and lawyers, they didn't want to. Nobody wants to hear about the law or the penalties for violating these laws, and nobody's putting anybody in jail for all these laws that they're breaking. But they tried to lock me up for crossing the street because I was walking funny. That was before I decided to use the wheelchair, and I was using bilateral forearm crutches, and it was a pain in the ass. Getting across the street and back, by the time I got home, used to leave me in tears. You should read about Smedley Butler. Smedley Butler and the 1930s plot to overthrow the president. But either way, thank you for listening. May your Creator always be with you and rain many blessings. I forever wish you a long life and good health. May what I know serve you well as well it served me. Knowledge is power, and the power is yours. But it's only for your taking. It's not something I can give to you. And if you go through all my posts, you'll find your constitutional rights are not a given. They must be earned. You have to go in there in that court with all these laws I'm showing you and fight as if your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness counts on it, because it does. All right, I'm not asking you to think like me. I'm just asking you to read these laws and, I'm an avid fan of history. When you search history, you find all these laws and who made them, and I always had to know the who, what's, where's, and why's. And I just thought you should know. If I was a public servant, I would be legally obligated to tell you this. Otherwise I'd be violating the oath. So it's seriously, this is not something they will teach you in school. It's rare that I have ever found anybody that knew about this, yet alone will speak about it. And the people that knew about it refused to speak about it and always walked away. All right, thank you and good night.